Welcome back into episode number 7. My name is Marcus Gnurk, and we have also Ned Phillips here. Good morning, Ned.
Good morning, Marcus. How is it in beautiful, sunny Vietnam today?
It is raining in beautiful sunny Vietnam. We have rain.
It's not raining in beautiful, sunny Singapore, but that's what people, I think, perceive when we live in this part of the world. It's always jungle and sun and shine. But the rain is, actually, I'm not sure the rain's not always warm in Vietnam, right? It can sometimes be a little
It depends
chilly
where
too.
you are. In the north of Vietnam, which I'm not based in right now, it can be very cold, and actually was very cold the last few weeks. So it goes down to 10 degrees Celsius. That makes you freezing. If you're on a motorbike, oh my God, you have to wear 5 layers.
I can see that your original German constitution now feels that 10 degrees is freezing. I'm sure as a young lad, as a young boy, 10 degrees was quite summery, really,
It was
in
nice.
Germany.
Having lived now in Southeast Asia for close to 10 years, yeah, your understanding of temperature changes dramatically. And I guess you feel the same after decades in this part of the world.
People often ask, how do I run in the heat? And of course, both of us like to run no matter what, but I suppose you do just get used to it. Other people who turn up, whether it's Singapore or Vietnam, are like, my word, it's too hot to run. But yes, I suppose you just must adapt to it.
Perfect. Enough of this British small talk about the weather. Let's jump right in. So we have an exciting episode today with a lot of different things to cover. As usual, we are digging up different stats, business information, and of course we have the race recap corner, which had some exciting races happening over the weekend, and we have your weekly drop off. I call it this time inspiration or admiration, depends how you see it, but we will come to this at the end of this show. All right, well, I was thinking the last few days, hey Ned, are we sitting in an echo chamber? And I'm sure we are, because we love the sport, we love this community. But it's always good to, I guess, being German, be critical and understand a bit more like what is going on inside this trail running echo chamber, ultra marathon I would put together. And of course, your dear backyard racing as well. At the same time, what is going on outside the echo chamber? Right. So I think we had a bit of a chat back and forth the last few days about the industry and the sport. So before going to stats, but what do you think? Are we in an echo chamber? What do you see outside the echo chamber? How do you feel about this?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that as Germans are critical and British talk about the weather, I'm glad we clearly follow our cliches. We must, it's impossible not to be. When you are into something so much, no matter how open-minded you try to be, you're of course consumed because you read what you want to read, you read more about the sport. So I assume we must be. And I always listen to Dylan Bowman's Free Trail, and he always finishes it with greatest sport in the world. And I love that love him for that. But also in reality, we are not the biggest or the greatest sport in the world. So we must be in some kind. I like to think we're both quite level-headed, but it's good to get some perspective.
Do you think it's a trending sport, and how would you rank this trend to other trends?
So again, being old and my first long distance ultra when I was 14, so that was 42 years ago, and I'm quite I like reading about the history of the sport. I mentioned in our first episode that in 1880 to 1890, pedestrianism or 6-day racing in New York was one of the biggest sports. So Madison Square Gardens used to sell out. So they would sell 20,000 tickets over 6 days, and people would come and go, and they would gamble and drink and watch the athletes. And it was a big trend, and there was a race across America, and it was quite short-lived. And then in the 70s and 80s, distance running in America, a guy called Jim Fixx made distance running popular in America. And then it kind of went away again. Running, movement as generally, movement is trending. Being active is trending. I did find out, though, and I'm not sure where I saw this stat, but only 5% of people in the world have run a 5K.
That is surprising.
I suppose if you take in the whole world, and remember, here's one piece of our echo chamber. We are both economically stable enough that we can indulge in this luxurious sport, whereas still a great deal of the world is struggling to survive. So I suppose it's probably maybe a higher percentage of the world that's economically available to do this sport. But trail running, and this is where the echo chamber comes in, it's massively booming. And I think I think the word is vignettes, my little things that I see, like Ford is using a trail runner, or Where You Look is trail running, or you see it more and more, or people know what you talk about with ultra. I think the trend is very clear, and I know you've dug into the stats today, and we're going to look through it. But even within our echo chamber, the number of people at races, the number of races, the number of media tags about it, and the willingness for people to not think you're totally crazy when you talk about it is there. Go for it.
So thanks, Ned. Let me bring some more juice to your perspective. The easiest thing, of course, to do is just to Google and say, hey, what's the trending sports right now? And I found a few articles. They're going to be in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you will also see a screen now popping up where you can see the 25 fastest growing sports in America from 2018 to 2022. Number one is pickleball, having grown by 171%. Doesn't come to a surprise, to be honest. Even my non-sporty friends are talking about pickleball these days. I went to France in Christmas time. You see pickleball fields coming up, courts coming up everywhere. It's quite something. And I think we don't have to dig into this too much. Have you played pickleball, Ned?
I have not, but
Okay.
I was in Kuwait. I was in Kuwait on a business trip, and it's quite a beautiful little smaller city in the Middle East. And I ran around the bay, and there was a huge pickleball club with like 50 courts and lots of people playing pickleball. So I am going to say pickleball probably reigns supreme. I've never tried it, but it must be something because it is growing everywhere.
The other, I mean, again, not to bore the audience here with too many different type of sports, but basically alpine touring, winter fat biking have been also number 2, number 3. Something called off-course golf, which seems to be
I
a
don't know,
thing,
man.
is growing fast as well. But more importantly, trail running in the US is on 7th position, having grown by 32% in those 4 years. And I think second, it's just followed by tennis. I think what's interesting, though, that trail running is amongst the top 7, the one with the largest participation of 10 million people, 10 million Americans doing it. So tennis, of course, has more, but trail running is with 10 million the second in the top 10. And I think that's actually quite important in terms of numbers and where this is going.
It is. And I think, so this is only up until 2022. This is good information. I'm going to say 23, 24 are only going to see larger numbers.
Okay.
They're only going to see larger and larger numbers. Oh yeah, you see you have a tag there. Can you click it? At the top, it has home running. Oh, that's just more about
Just
it.
gonna just explore more than
Explains
this.
what it is.
Yeah. But okay, so let me then continue this and just to challenge you on a bit more points here. So going over to the Deutsche Ultramarathon Vereinigung, which basically is a German website of the German Ultramarathon Association, which again, the Germans have put out a lot of stats here as well. And it's not, of course, a comprehensive database of all the ultra runners in the world, but at least it covers, you can see almost 2 million runners globally out of 200 nations. So quite significant. The US and France are leading with ultra running, followed by South Africa and Japan. I believe South Africa is due to the very famous Comrades Marathon.
Yep.
And on number 5, we have the United Kingdom, followed by China, number 6. I think that's all fine. I'm not going to cover this too much, but I thought in terms of races, and that's something I saw, is there's a stat on count of races per year in the world. And what you can see down here, it peaked in 2019. So in 2019, this database had 7,500 races. And of course, COVID, major issue. But 2023, you can argue COVID was over, and there was only 1,400 races. So it has not recovered yet to the pre-COVID levels. So 2019 was a major year for ultramarathon and trail races.
7,000 races, and I'm going to take a guess. It will be pretty soon that it's 10,000, and I'm sure while this is obviously good stats, it doesn't cover them all. 10,000 races, it's hard to say how many in each race, because some races have, like the Comrades Marathon has thousands, and other races have a few hundred. But it certainly means that every weekend, even if you look at that means there's at least 150 races every weekend going on around the world. So we are trending. These numbers are absolutely showing that, but we're nowhere near saturation. Nowhere near.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the growth from 2000, it was 600 races to 7,500 in 20 years. That is incredible, right?
Yeah. No, this is. It's going to be incredibly hard to get the absolute accurate number of where we are today, because you can't really measure it exactly. We know what an ultra is, but trail runner.
Yeah.
But yes. Maybe soon we'll be the greatest sport in the world.
Yeah, maybe soon. That's true. That's well, and also another way of looking at it, I looked to Strava. So Strava published in January 4th their year in sport. So they have a lot of data, of course. I mean, who doesn't know Strava, the sport activity tracking app? And it's interesting for me as well. And I want to point out a few more stats here, and I want you to comment on that in a few sentences, because I do think we don't just want to recreate content here. We also want to create, of course, original content. And who's better than this than you, Ned? So I think one of the few things, I mean, it's quite clear, Strava, the biggest activity was a run, followed by the ride. I'm not sure that's representative of the world, but most runners and cyclists I know use Strava, and that's fine. What I found interesting was how the Gen Z is doing it compared to the other, I guess, generations. So basically, Strava says Gen Z logged the fastest median run and ride, but also the shortest run. So they're running faster, but also shorter. Is that so? Gen Z, for everyone, of course, is 20 to 26, I think, age group, depending on, of course, how you count the years, but along those lines. The younger people are going faster and slower, Ned. What do you think?
I love this stat. I think this nailed it. I think this was really great. There's lots of interesting stuff here. But that's just the fact. That's why ultra and trail, despite the people who are winning, like right at the front, who are younger people who are, as we talked about one of our first episodes, young people coming, or young pro athletes coming straight to ultra and trail. But when you look around an ultra, it's 40-year-olds, it's 50-year-olds, it's 60-year-olds when you look at trail. It is getting younger. I would be interested in Strava's data over the years. But I think there's also young men. I can't speak as a young lady, but as a young man, young men have more egos. They just have to go quicker. I used to think running 6 minutes per K, I'll be honest, was laughable. I used to think, what? Do people actually run 6 minutes per K? When I was like 30, what's going on? Now I can't break on occasion I can break 6 minutes per K. But I think this is a great thing, because as you get older, you want to keep running. And speed is wonderful, but it isn't the answer as you get older. So I think this bears out clearly in the stats. It's good for racing. It's good for longevity. And I think it's also just a part of growing up. You realize that you want to keep running. You don't have to go fast.
Let me throw in a few more nuggets here for you, which is, now that Gen Zs are participating more in the sport of running and cycling in this case, assuming they also have some financial stability, given that usually the countries they're living in, and Strava is operating in countries where societies are wealthy by now. So they don't have necessarily the worry to work that much anymore, like the boomers or the Gen X, which, the post-war generation had to do other things than running. So we're talking about a fairly wealthy, young, fast, speedy generation. What does it do to the industry? How does the industry of the sport adapt to this and cater to this?
I've always been fascinated that Strava hasn't shown us adverts. This audience is demographically an audience the companies would like to market to. So you say, the demographic of this audience, not only being younger, more social media focused, from a business point of view, so they said they have 120 million athletes. Can you imagine that as as an audience? I mean, you work in nutrition, I would be hard pressed to find any advertiser or any company that's selling a product would not be interested. Because okay. Here's a question. Oh, did Strava ask about their education levels?
No, they didn't.
This is going to be a highly educated, financially doing well, type A. This is an audience you just want to sell stuff to, thinking from a business point of view.
Now you're, of course, triggering my entrepreneurial brain again. And I have a feeling, I'm just putting it out there, we should ask the audience if we should analyze certain sports businesses in the show. I think it was worth digging into Strava a bit, and I've been following this a bit more. I'm not prepared for this right now, but all I can say is that it's a company that has struggled over the years with return on investment. They have their own investors. They have venture capitalists on the cap table. I know by now they have invested for more than 10 years. They are getting nervous to get the money back. Strava has not innovated much from my perspective. I think we should get into Strava a bit more because the potential it has is significant, given the captured audience of, as you say, a wealthy global crowd, that you could do so much with that platform, community, ecosystem.
It is, I'm not going to say a whole show, but Marcus, I could sit with you all day and talk about this. The article that you shared, so listeners, just to call it out, Strava has 120 million athletes, has 10 billion activities shared on Strava last year, 190 countries, 3,000 professional athletes. That seems low. I'm surprised. I would be 10 billion kudos. 10 billion. That's something. We must be able to do something with the 10 billion. And it carries on 10 million photos. Interestingly, 3,200 partner organizations making their communities better with Strava Metro. I didn't know what that was. But to your point, I still don't think they're profitable. Is that correct? I don't know if we know for sure, Marcus, but I don't think they're profitable yet.
Let me do some digging, and
okay.
I don't think I can cover it now because I don't want to say the wrong things publicly, but I'm sure we can find some more stats on this. But it's a private company in the US, and we promise you guys we will dig into it a bit more because I do think it's a key element of this community. Everyone is on Strava, and for some reason, it's not really. The fact that we only talk about it now in episode 7 also tells you a bit that it should be more important, right?
But it is so important because, as we know, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen, right?
Yeah. The last thing that came up on the Strava side was, and I'm putting up back the Year in Sport article of Strava, was that more than 50% of people complained about the heat. So 75% of athletes on Strava said extreme heat affected their exercise plans, and poor air quality affected 27%. I found this also quite interesting because, of course, the other topic is climate change. We have more extreme weather. How is that going to change our industry?
I'm not sure whether to get triggered or not here. I'm taking a decision as we speak. What the hell? You think it's it? As you know, the weather is my favorite topic because I'm British. I knew we would get back to this. You said enough of my British small talk. I knew you would come back to the weather. Congratulations. So on the air quality, absolutely, climate change is a problem and we need to fix that. And, both of us have been lucky enough to travel and we've run in some Asian cities where air quality is pretty miserable. So we both know that sucks. I'm really interested in this extreme heat. Now, in full disclosure, I live in Singapore. I'm used to the heat, so it's easy for me to say, suck it up. But do people really not go running when it's 1 or 2 degrees hotter? Like, it's a bit like when I ran in the rain, and like in Singapore when it rains, literally there's 90% people out less on a Sunday morning when it rains, and the rain's hot here. This is my little triggered rant. I'm fascinated because if you're running on Strava, you're pretty, what's the right word? Hardy. You're out there. You're exercising. You're hardy. The weather being 1, 2 degrees warmer, and I'm not saying I'm not trying to belittle climate change in any which way, but I'm interested in, like, if I go to Scotland on holiday, or I was in America last year, it was minus 20. What do? You go running. I was in Singapore, it's 35 degrees. What do? You go running. Marcus, do people really not go out because it's a little hotter?
No, I think we need to be empathetic with the Strava community, which I'm assuming is a lot in the West, America, Europe, those countries. The people living there are used to milder climates. Things are changing. For us living in the tropics, we're used to it. We know it. Our context is it's hot. Get on with it. It's fine. But I think for someone who's not really used to the extreme weathers and you live in those climates, you are surprised by it. So I think it's just a matter of fact that you just get hotter and they need to get used to it. If they would move out here, then you get used to it. You have no other chance. But given that you've been maybe running for 20 years, 10 years, and it is getting hotter in summers or more extreme and colder in winters, I don't want to be a scientist on climate change, but I think that's just how they are feeling it. It's more like it's a feeling of how it used to be and now how it feels like now.
And I'm not a scientist on climate change, and climate change is real, and we need to fix it 100%. But if you are in Germany or America and it's cold, you'll still go for a run, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I rather go on a run in the cold, to be honest, than in the heat. I think that, but what I'm leading to this as well is that the industry has to adapt as well, whether it's your clothing, your gear, make it more multifunctional, make it more breathable, make it cooling, and of course nutrition. You need to think more about electrolytes, sodium, magnesium, calcium. So, you know, as a company founder of a nutrition brand, it's definitely worth looking into to say, hey, how do you adapt to the need for electrolytes? I think it's very important, and that's like we are almost experts from the heat. We've been running and training in this for a long time. I'm going to be honest, I've been suffering quite a bit the last few years from the heat here, and I did not adapt correctly. And I think I'm taking some changes now to increase my amount of electrolytes because I sweat a lot. I have a very, very high sweat rate, and I'm losing a lot of electrolytes. And I have not been conscious enough to replenish my electrolyte batteries.
It took me 25 years of running in the heat before I realized I should be taking more salt tablets. And so I increased my sodium. And interestingly, Zach Miller, who we know came second in the epic UTMB with Jim, the point heard around the world as he crossed the line and pointed at Jim. Afterwards, he credited his girlfriend for saying to Zach, who I'm not sure if his girlfriend is a particularly in nutrition or whatever, but clearly she knows, apparently he hadn't been taking salt tablets and sodium. He just hadn't quite figured it out. And that's Zach, people. That's Zach.
Yep.
I'm guilty
too. I'm guilty. I have not done it for the last 6 years, and I started to really get into trail running in the last 6 years in Singapore first and then in Vietnam. I have taken 0 tablets. 0. Yeah. Don't get me started. I know I sweat a lot, but at the same time, I just didn't do it.
Dude. So it took me 25 years. It took me a long time. And so now when I run, I tell you one thing. I'm taking 2 an hour. So when I did that 100K, I think I took 20 at least. I think I ran out. I had 20. I took all 20. They were all gone. And not only does it help you at the time, but the recovery the next day. And again, I'm not a scientist. For some reason, like as some of the people who follow me on Strava know, I run a marathon every weekend just for fun, not an exact marathon, 40, 50K. I have no leg soreness. Now, partly because I do it every weekend, therefore it's fine, right? It's like anybody, you do it, it becomes normal. But since I took sodium, anyway, this is not just a nutrition show, but sodium is important.
Maybe you need a nutrition sponsor, Ned.
We could talk about that, Marcus.
Yes. All right, moving on. Thank you for the insights on the trends. I wanted to highlight one more part in terms of business in this world. Something that wasn't really covered, but I thought is definitely also noteworthy, is the IPO of Amer Sports. So the question is, who is Amer Sports? Do you know them, Ned?
I had heard of them a little, and I read your article. Salomon. Imagine you had said Salomon when IPO. People would be doing backflips.
Yep. So Amer Sports, for the ones who don't know, and I think you should know, is the conglomerate holding company that owns many different brands. It owns Salomon, Actarix, Wilson, which is from tennis world, Peak Performance. So they own quite a different bunch of brands in the tennis, ball racket, outdoor sports, and winter sports kind of world. And Amer Sports went public a few weeks ago on the New York Stock Exchange. So anyone watching can see the kind of IPO news on Forbes. What I found interesting for this one is that, kind of coming back to one of the reasons why we're doing the show, they are basically owned more than 50% by Anta Sports. So who's Anta Sports? Anta is a Chinese company who is the third largest manufacturer of the footwear, sportswear behind Adidas and Nike. And Anta has their own lines. Anta Sports is also large in Vietnam, for example, shoe lines. But they also more half own Amer Sports. So the Chinese have already been buying up Amer Sports the last few years and now have made it to more than 50%. Now they're listed on the IPO and on the NYSE and continuing to have a very strong influence there as a Chinese shareholding. The other part that I found interesting, guess who also owns 20% of Amer Sports?
Well, I'm not allowed to guess because I read it.
Please share the news.
The founder of Lululemon.
Exactly, Mr. Chris Wilson. I'm like, he got into that the last few years and was brought in as an investor and as a board member in order to boost Salomon's and other brands' consumer businesses, especially the online business. And his stake of 20%, I think, is worth more than 100 million by now. I found interesting that part, especially because we just talked about Lululemon a few weeks ago, and we said Lululemon is also going into trail running. So there seems to be a very interesting mix of interest aligned here, or pushing in the same direction, of Anta Sports going to trail running, Amer Sports having Salomon, Actarix as trail running. We have Lululemon going into trail running. So all of those are kind of linked together to a certain extent. I don't think consumers really know this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Lululemon is going to use the same manufacturer than Salomon in China.
I'm going to say this is one of your best bits of detective work. I think no one else covered this, Marcus. You're good at this detective work. This connection between Lululemon, between a company like Louisville Slugger. If you're American, that's one of the most famous baseball brands, right? Wilson, if you're tennis, coming together here with the owner, out of China. But here's quite interesting. I don't know if you noticed in the article, the whole company as a whole is still unprofitable.
Yeah, the loss was 17 million dollars last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it says in the article that some of them are kind of more legacy brands that they're trying to fix. But the ones with the biggest runway, they said, were Salomon and Arc'teryx. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce it. $949 million in Salomon. So I'm not sure if Salomon is loss-making because we didn't dive into the balance sheet that far. But the article seems to say that their growth, they believe in, are these adventure and running brands, outdoor brands, rather than perhaps the tennis. I wonder if, or maybe Wilson starts making pickleball rackets to get into the trend.
Maybe that could be it. I mean, kind of aligned with this is an announcement just 14 days ago. Actarix is coming up with their own designed trail shoe. So far, they've been basically taking Salomon shoes and rebranding it as their own shoe, given that's the same mother company. But now they're basically coming up with their own trail running shoe that is still produced from the same company, but it has a different team on it, a different design concept. So they're also ramping up the ideas of their own as their own, I guess, brand in that Amer Sports ecosystem. But yeah, so long story short, Amer Sports is doubling down on two things. They're the most profitable already in the outdoor sports segment. I did look into the IPO filing and I read through it last night. And
Wow.
the most profitable part of the business is the outdoor sports business. It generates the most revenue and is the most profitable one. That Actarix and Salomon are the two brands in that portfolio. So they're doubling down on that part, and they're doubling down on the consumer business, where they have only a very small portion of the revenue comes from direct to consumer, so online at 20 something percent. They want to get to Lululemon style 50%. And the last part is they want to focus mostly on North America, Europe, and Greater China. Not any other regions, at least they don't name it particularly.
So you're saying that they're going to do shoes, and forgive me for not looking at the camera right now. I am trying to find a post. Can't see it right now. I'll paraphrase it. At what point, Marcus, before I mention this post, at what point do you think the shoe brand world is saturated?
Very good question, and I think we're coming there actually soon. I have a feeling that there is, just like a road running, we will see just a few major brands surviving. Right now, everyone is trying, everyone is jumping on the train, but also I do think there will be consolidation. Given that financial markets are going to change rather soon, we see interest rates probably going down again, liquidity goes up. That means there's more cash to consolidate. I do think we see more M&A in the next 5 years coming up, whether it's a Hoka going to buy up more brands, or whether it's Chinese buying up more brands. Right now, I don't think it's possible because it's too expensive to buy stuff. Interest rates are too high. You can't raise capital that easily. But in the next 5 years, yeah, I'm sure that given the market is saturated and given that liquidity is going to be increasing again, I think we're going to see more M&A.
The reason I ask that is this, not everyone, but Lululemon, Arc'teryx, everybody's doing it. The OG, the legend, Carl Meltzer, Mr. Speed Goat himself. So just a little, I won't detour too far, but Mr. Meltzer, who has won more 100-mile races than anyone else, has probably really one of the OGs of our sport. He doesn't fly. He hates to fly. He very rarely flies. He drives everywhere in America. He drives overnight, runs 100 miles, sleeps in his car, drives home again, right? He was the very first athlete for Hoka. So he was Hoka's first athlete. And if you run in Speed Goats, that's Carl Meltzer, right? It's not Speed Goat for a goat. That's Carl Meltzer's name. It is Speed Goat. And he, way back when, 20 years ago, when Hoka took the chance to be a competitive brand, it seemed crazy to get into the footwear brand. It just seems, the footwear business seemed crazy. As we discussed, Hoka, I think previously, has like 1.5 billion of revenue and has done something I think is going to be very hard to replicate, which has started to dominate. And he wrote a post the other day. He's so calm and chill, Carl Meltzer, and he doesn't fly, but he had to fly. And he was in the airport and his plane was delayed 10 hours. So he sat, watched. He said he could not believe the amount of people walking around the airport in Hokas. He wrote a beautiful post on Facebook. This humble little brand started with a couple of guys in Chamonix. He said everywhere, 1 in 10 people almost, if they had trainers, had Hokas. And as he was queuing up to get on his plane, the guy in front of him was wearing Speed Goats. And he said, I just didn't know whether I should tap him on the shoulder and say, that's actually me. But he's so humble and cool, he didn't. But it was a beautiful post about how amazing Hoka has done. And whether somebody could do that again, I don't know. But amazing how the shoe brand has changed.
That's true. Little anecdote as well from Vietnam. You have a lot of tourists here, of course, and you can identify the Americans by wearing Hoka and the Europeans by wearing On Cloud.
Yeah.
So it's quite obvious.
On Cloud was another successful shoe brand that grew, started by a German triathlete, or started by a
Swiss,
triathlete,
Swiss,
a
Swiss
Swiss, right?
based.
Swiss. Yeah. So, and these are the rarities. What I'm interested in is will Speedland, out of Dylan Bowman's brand, Speedland, which are these new high price shoes out of Portland, Oregon, which are trying to grow in a more niche. Anyway,
I mean, as I say, if there's a gold rush, you rather sell shuffles, right? And that's where I think I'm coming back to my analysis, my brief analysis, is that someone like Anta Sports is probably producing for all of them. Like, we see this huge boost in brands on the front, whether it's Hoka, On Cloud, Salomon, and whatnot, but they have to produce it somewhere, and that happens in Vietnam, in China, and other parts of the world, and they are not usually owned by those companies. I don't know, but looking at just the Salomon example, they are not, and that's where the infrastructure, the manufacturing part behind all this, whether it's also vests or other gear, that's where right now the money is made, and I am sure that the manufacturing partners are rubbing their hands and smiling given this whole trend.
100%. It's a good trend.
Wonderful. Another thing that came up on my radar was Never Second and Jim Walmsley. Never Second is a very great and one of the leading nutrition brands out of Europe. And our dear friend Jim has become a partner of Never Second. And just to be very clear, Never Second produces a range of products from gels to energy bars and powders. I would call it a typical endurance nutrition portfolio. And Jim has been using them for already some time, especially for his big win at UTMB, and has been then reaching out to them afterwards, and then they became partners. Great to see not just Mountain making it, but also other brands coming into it now, and athletes really picking the brand they like.
We are a show that talks about running, but because we're both entrepreneurs, or we've tried and we've been through the journey, we're fascinated by the business side of it. We are going to talk about a trail race in Saudi Arabia shortly that had a prize pool of 480,000, which is massive. But UTMB, the prize pools are like 15,000 or right at the top. What I'm fascinated by is what would Jim get for this? Zach Miller said on a podcast the other day that they are starting to make real money. The top guys, Jim, Courtney, Killian, Tom Evans. But I'm really fascinated to understand, obviously, what a great athlete. It's great that he's using this nutrition, but it's interesting to see I would love to see the economics behind this.
Same. I can only guess, but we're talking several tens of thousands a year, I think. Yeah.
And when you say that, I both laugh and cry. Isn't it a sport that the seventh fastest growing sport, one of the great sports, 10,000, 20,000. Look at tennis. Look at football. I bet you pickleball people are making more money than us. Like, it's almost scandalous. Like, endurance sports. Like, the prize money at UTMB, not just to pick on UTMB, but it's like 10, 15K. It's like, what's going on? It's almost crazy. These people should be making hundreds of thousands. And, maybe they are. We don't know. But it's not deep. If you're the number 100th ranked tennis player in the world, you're making money. If you're the number 100th ranked ultra trail runner in the world, you are not making money. You're not making money. And I hope that changes, not just for money's sake, but for longevity in the sport. Because if we don't make this, your example of what it costs to be a Vietnamese trail runner, the $176,000 of GDP to be able to do this. And I was talking to a pro runner the other day, and we'll talk about this afterwards, Marcus, who basically said, we were talking about nutrition sponsorship, and he basically said, oh yeah, I would do nutrition sponsorship for product. Why? Because I have to take out a mortgage to do my race just on nutrition. Gels every time, obviously not quite, but imagine if you only win $10,000 to win a race and you've got to fly there and travel there. So I am fascinated to see what the sponsorship levels, and I hope they increase.
Yeah, that is true. You already jumped the gun there, Ned, so let me just rush right to it as well, that not just the football players make lots of money in the Middle East. Now we have a Tough Mudder race. Tough Mudder is part of the obstacle course racing segment where the entire prize purse was $480,000 for that first ever 2024 Tough Mudder race in Saudi Arabia. Happened over the weekend. Quickly on the race, so obstacle course racing is, in this case, it was a 10-kilometer course with 20 obstacles. So it's climbing, it's robbing, it's jumping, it's whatnot. And you had to do as many loops as possible in 8 hours. So that was basically the course. What's important to note here, two things. First, of course, the prize money. So the winner got 80,000, female and male. By the way, the same prize money. I like that. And the second part is that most of the participants were actually trail runners, very well-known individuals from the trail running world. The winner was Jonathan Albin from the UK, but living in Norway. Alisa Petrova from Russia. Jonathan, I think, was the winner of CCC a few years ago. He crushed this race, collected $80,000 in prize money compared to, I think, UTMB. I'm trying to figure out the number right now, but it's definitely less than this. And I had the number somewhere. Apologies.
I think it was 15. Then I read it. I think the number I remember was 15. I'm not sure for sure, but it was substantially less than 80,000.
What's going on there? Like, where's this coming from? This was popping up this morning, and I was like, wow, this is significant. We should talk about this.
This is a long, complex topic. The word sports washing gets thrown around, but in reality, sports is part of our lives. Look at the Super Bowl, $5 million for a 30-second advert in the halftime show. The money in sports is incredible. And the fact that a country in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, is using money and using sport to promote itself is partly what countries do all around the world. I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but it's fantastic. They have money. They want to grow sports. For those of you listening in America, soccer. For the rest of the world, football. I don't know how much Ronaldo got paid, but I think he gets about $480,000 a day to be there or something like that. The amounts of money that kind of getting put at sport is boxing matches are happening there, football, etc. And I think, they're willing to go into growth sports and grow it. But this should be the right prize money for UTMB. How UTMB winner doesn't get $100,000 is madness. Like, to me, this is actually the right amount of money. Let's say an athlete can do 2 or 3 races a year. They should be winning this amount of money. So what's going on? I think it's a country with, I'm not going to say unlimited, but I'm going to say unlimited funds, which is looking to change its perception in the world, is clearly using sports, and people can debate the rights and wrongs of that. And trail running is getting its tiny, tiny, tiny little share of it.
I mean, there's also the Formula One race happening in Bahrain this weekend, and I don't want to even know the numbers that are thrown around there. But in any case, I do think it is government stepping up the game in that region, providing funding to those races, where usually races are sponsored by companies, corporates. Governments are supporting it, I think, as much as they can, but it's not common to see governments providing so much cash. More trail running, more races in the Middle East. Have you have you been to parts of Oman, for example?
I haven't been to Oman. I've been to Saudi Arabia. I've been to Kuwait. I've been to Bahrain. I've been to Qatar, UAE. Clearly as we learned with the World Cup, which I still find the most hilarious situation, when they originally awarded the World Cup in summer, only to realize it's really hot, which was obviously a stunning surprise to everybody. And then changed it to winter. But sports are growing there. Interestingly, the Dubai Marathon is one of the fastest marathons around because it happens in January. It's flat. There's no turns. It's up and down the boardwalk. It's very quick. And I think sports are growing. It's still small there, but I've never raced there. But I have been out for runs. I actually ran for 25K in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh. It was interesting. It was an interesting experience. I'll say that.
It could also mean that runners are having an advantage who are used to the heat. So given that in terms of, for those races, not of course racing in the Arctic, but as races are coming up in these parts of the world, including also Asia, and I would kind of argue Middle East is somewhere between Europe and Asia. You can see how, if you are, Southeast Asian runner who's used to the heat, you could probably have a good chance in making it to the top 10 in a Saudi Arabian race.
And look, Jonathan Albon, he 2014 was a world champion. He came from obstacle course racing. I've listened to him. He's incredibly just calm but smart dude, and he knows what he's doing, man. He's making a business out of this. He's an incredible athlete. Trains up there with Petter Engdahl and the GOAT, Kilian himself, up in Norway. These Norwegians across sports, whether it's triathlon, running, these Norwegians or people who live there, man, we got to move there, Marcus. We got to become pro athletes by moving to Norway.
Maybe. All right, let's move on to a very special race, the Trans Gran Canaria, the oldest trail ultramarin running race in Spain, happened over the weekend on the beautiful island of Gran Canaria. It is part of the World Trail Major Series, the new series who just was announced a few weeks ago. Looks like a great race, beautiful race. I am going to highlight a few things of the results here. Everyone watching can see it on the screen. We had Raul Butaki, Romania, smashing it, coming first. The Spanish also been quite strong there. Noteworthy is Jia Shen, coming fifth from China. I think that's definitely noteworthy. He suffered quite a bit. I think he was hoping for top 3, but he is the only Asian in the top 20. And of course, Ned, what happened to the Queen?
Well, before we get to Courtney, obviously this race is one of the greats. But is it fair to say Jiang Shen is Chinese top trail racer? Is that fair to say? I think so.
I think he's at least the top trail racer who travels outside China a lot. I'm not sure we can always know what's going inside China, but at least he takes the trips to go to UTMB, to go to other places in the world, including Gran Canaria.
Incredibly competitive race. Zach Miller was 7th, so he was 5th, and he struggled. If he'd been top 3, this is a very European race. So a couple of things to note. It was live streamed, so amazing coverage. I watched it. Poured with rain overnight, cold, fog, rain. So it was, and the men's race, the lead changed all the time, backwards and forwards. Of course, as you mentioned, the Queen, who won this last year in half an hour quicker time because the conditions were better. Last year she wasn't leading straight away. This year, 2 minutes in, she's leading, she's gone, she's winning. But I was just randomly, didn't watch it all, but I was just randomly turning it on and off. I saw her in the middle of not the middle of the night, but maybe in dawn. This race starts at midnight. So it's slightly different. It's very rocky, very hilly, etc. I tell you what, when Courtney talks about the pain cave, when they had a camera on her one time, that smile was, she put it back on when the camera swung by, but she was in there, man. You could tell she was suffering. And in her blog post, she said, woo, got that done, but this was a sufferfest. And it was interesting to watch. She had her music on, so I don't know what she listens to. Courtney, if you're listening to this, please tell us what music you listen to. But she had her headphones on. She was head down, and man, she had her stare on, and she looked like she was doing it hard, real hard.
Guess how many people have watched the live stream all together now?
I don't know, because when I was watching, it wasn't many. But how many, Marcus?
So the impressions are now counted as of today, 220,000 views.
Wow. Okay. That's really good.
So we made it one of our tasks to track those numbers for live stream, because this for us is an important indicator of the popularity of the sport. So let's keep in mind that this World Trail Majors got 220,000 views so far. I'm sure there are going to be more given people are watching it now, maybe during the week. But as of Tuesday, 27th of February, 220,000 views of this race.
Not bad.
Not bad, right? We should keep this in mind. I would love to go there, man. This sounds beautiful. This.
Oh, this is one of the greats. Like, this is really one of the great races. Like, we have Western States and Comrades and UTMB. Gran Canaria is one of the greats. It looks epic, hard, volcanic, wild. I think up alongside the Diagonal des Fous, one of the toughest ones out there. Alrighty, what do you got here?
I'm a little surprised for us here, but I do want to mention this. There also was the New Delhi Marathon happening over the weekend, and I again bringing us back to Asia as we want to cover this part of the world as well. We had 20,000 people participating in the New Delhi Marathon. So I had the pleasure of talking to some more Indians last few weeks, given that with Lekka we just soft launched in India, and I've been connecting with various parties up in India. It is staggering to me how little actually the numbers are on the long distances in India. So the estimates are that only 20 to 50,000 people in India are currently into marathon running. A country of 1.6 billion people.
Wow.
Around 200,000 to 500,000 on the 5K distance, so much more. But on the anything above the 42K distance, we are talking, 10,000 doing ultra. So that's some interesting stats that I got the last few weeks, and it is starting from a very low base. But of course, given 1.6 billion people, it will only grow in the right direction.
We talk business and running. Somebody told me in business, the best place to start is when there is all opportunity. Don't get in at the peak. You are not getting in at the peak of Indian ultra running, that is for sure, or Indian running for sure. The other thing that's powering this country forward, for anybody who hasn't been to India, it's an incredible country. As Marcus said, it is the world's most populous country now, more than China. The economic upgrade of that country is astounding. I mean, I first went there 30 years ago, and having been back on several occasions, but again, I was there a year ago, it's astounding what's happened in India and what's changed.
Yeah.
And with economic growth comes a bad thing, bad food. People start to eat American food because when you get money, what do you want? You want American food. And what happens? You get unhealthy. Therefore, you start running. And I think this trend, this combination of economic prosperity, which gives time to run, but allows people to eat Big Macs, which are bad, which makes people then want to have health, which will grow. Give it 20 years' time, Indian running will be huge.
Yeah, it also comes with, I think, a lot of air pollution at the moment. We do know that, unfortunately, India has a lot of polluted cities. It's not very conducive to running outside. The wealthy people who are usually doing the sport are in the cities, they can't run. So it's a bit of a combination of a few factors there. And we will have, I can announce it now, we will have a show coming up where we have a snapshot of the Indian running market being covered. We will invite some guests on the show for each country to cover these. We want to hear it from the people on the ground. I'm sure the stats are going to be more accurate then, but we're excited to cover these countries a bit more in detail in the next few episodes.
It would be fantastic. I cannot wait. I actually lived in India for a year and I love that country. It's amazing. About a year ago, I went for a run. I was there on business in Pune. Pune is maybe a city people outside India have not heard, or in other countries in the West. I don't know. It's got like 5 million people, or these huge cities. One thing I will say, Marcus, as you say, running in Indian cities is not easy. The roads are chaotic. There's traffic everywhere. And as a foreigner running in the city, I got quite a bit of attention trying to cross roads and buses and tuk-tuks and all the craziness. It was quite the experience, but would I want to run in the traffic? So I think you're right. There was a bit of a challenge for people with money. If you're living in Mumbai or New Delhi or Pune, it's a bit of a quandary. I'm not quite sure how you get out for your daily run. You just do it.
It's a daily obstacle course racing.
Yes, that is correct.
Jumping over chickens and buffaloes and cars and tuk-tuks.
Correct.
Wonderful. Okay, that's a wrap. However, one more thing missing. We're going to hear now Ned's drop of admiration for a specific individual who make the sport. Ned, are you ready?
Always.
Take it away.
Normal. Is it what we do? Killian makes it look new normal. But running has always been normal, right? 10 million years ago, we ran to the supermarket. That's what a mammoth was called then, a running, hairy-horned supermarket. We ran it out of energy. We have more energy. Humans can outrun anything. No animal has our endurance. We are kings and queens of running forever. So it's normal to run until we catch things. But sadly, we don't need to do that anymore. Kmart, Tesco, Costco, they don't run away when we approach. They give up so easily and offer us donuts. We say, yay, a sugary treat without running. I'll have a dozen, please. We drive home, sit in our AC or heated cave in front of our views, flickering from our digital fires. Net fire, that's what it's called, right? We can stare all night. The flames never go out. And we don't even have to collect fuel to keep it glowing. So we don't have to run. Instead, it's become normal not to run. We are so comfortable that our greatest utility, our endless endurance, is now effectively useless. So we evolve to be slow and stationary. And that has become normal. But not us. No way. Not us ultra trail runners. We have that old human inside, refusing the donut. Well, actually, me and Duncan are pals, but don't tell anybody. You can't outrun a donut, but you can be a running human and feel what it is to be human before being a modern human became normal. Killian's new normal isn't new. It's amazing. It's old. It's us as we were before. Endless running beings. Normal. A marathon? Nah, too short. 100K? 100 miles. Now we're talking 200 miles, the new 100 miles, and longer. Yes, longer, because that's how awesome we are. The greatest running animals ever invented. You can run further than you or I believe. And I believe you can run forever. The more of us who run, the more it becomes normal. New normal. Back to our roots. And while I love the trappings of this modern life, I've never felt more normal than when my legs are wrecked, my undercarriage chafed, my calories gone, and my soul overflowing. Stand up, lace up, be human. The greatest running machines ever. Just doing what we are designed to do. Just being normal. See you out there, Ned.
Thanks, Ned. I always look forward to these drops at the end of the show. I mean, I do read them beforehand, but hearing them from you is a different experience. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you. I like writing about things I love, and I love running, and I like writing, and the fact that some people would like to hear it, and we can have this opportunity, I appreciate it too. It was fun.
I do like the term net fire. You can replace the NET with NED, then it's your fire. But net fire, it is something that would stick in my mind. I can see maybe some merchandise coming up. Net fire. Anyway.
This was Laz. Like, we can't go one show without me mentioning Laz. He writes beautifully, and he once wrote about, really, we're going to sit in front of our screens? Really? Get out there, people. So a little bit inspired. And yeah, I was thinking about a cave fire and then Netflix and net fire. Anyway,
anyone who just wants to see Ned giving his drops, I now have, it's available on YouTube. So we have only the snippets of you giving the drop as well on YouTube. So if you want to skip all our bubbling from beforehand, it's fine. You can just go to YouTube and find Ned's drop there as well in a different section.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, man. That was great. And everyone, thanks for listening. Please go to our website, onemorek.com, Twitter, onemorek, Instagram, onemorek. Subscribe, share, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you, as you actually already are reaching out a lot. And we appreciate hearing from you all the time. And let's keep this machine rolling.
Trail running, greatest sport in the world. We'll see you next week.